Hello to the lovely Desiree and the lovely Gertrude. It is a pleasure to be getting to talk with you guys again for my third weekly Indigenous log, if you will. Now, this week I won't be singing a song, unfortunately, and I hope you enjoyed the last one. This week we're just talking because there was a subject that we talked about today in class that really struck me to my core, and it's the idea of the hero's journey and what that means for Western and East, for Western worlds and for things outside of the Western world. I realized that for the first time, I think, truly everything is inspired by culture. You know, everything. Music, writing, performance, everything. And I realized that what that means is if you have a dominant controlling culture, like Western culture, like the Brits, the Germans, the French, the Portuguese, etc., and they imperialize and conquer, they're going to spread their beliefs and their way they do things into other places too, to the new places they conquer. New being new for them, not actually new. And I realized that that's no different for our writings, for our methods that we write movies, methods that we write books, stories, because the main thing that we base our knowledge, our creativity off of is the lives we've lived. And I realized how this written tradition really impeded and impacted oral tradition, and how you get films like Pocahontas that try to inappropriately and incorrectly represent thousands of years of oral tradition and show it in a westernized point of not just view but writing, to take oral tradition and to try and put that into writing. And I wanted to think on this idea, and this is what I want to talk about. Can someone's culture and writing, can Indigenous writings and culture be properly put into a Western point of view? And vice versa, can Western culture be properly put into the Indigenous point of view? I think the answer is no, because when you take something that at its core is based off of tradition for hundreds or thousands of years, trying to put that tradition into a different lens is incredibly difficult and near impossible to be successful at. Now, there are plays like Bears and Tooth and Talon that are in more of a hero's journey point of view from Indigenous tales, Indigenous stories written in more of a hero's journey point of view, and they're brilliantly written. However, I've seen a lot of arguments that they are still taken out of the pure context. And I wonder if you tried to put stories, classic stories like Star Wars and etc., into an oral facility, if they would hold up in the same fashion, or if without a script, without it being written down, knowledge for knowledge, word for word, if it would stand as beautifully and traditionally as Indigenous stories do. So I think it's a really interesting idea to explore, and it's one that I'm continuing to explore, the idea of, can we not trade culture, but trade methods of teaching, of learning, of loving? And the answer I came to personally when I was doing my own research was no. We cannot just flip. We can't just have a Scottish person live an Indigenous lifestyle, and an Indigenous person just live into a American lifestyle. Because now we can't, being that we shouldn't, because that's not fair to the person, their traditions, and their spirituality, religion, everything. So what I think is interesting is reading plays like Tooth and Talon and Bear and stuff like that. We get to be invited, like the reading that we had on our first week. The brilliant writer, he said, don't read this section. This section's not for you. This is for the Indigenous peoples, and then you get to read this section. The idea that we can't just take someone's culture, learn everything about it, and then live it. We can take inspiration from each other's cultures, which we have done, many peoples in the world, Indigenous peoples as well. have shared their spirituality, shared their culture with peoples. So we can share our traditions, our religions, our spiritualities, our food, our language, our culture. But we can't just bait and switch. And I think that that's what a lot of Western plays have struggled with. They've tried to do the complete bait and switch and just be like, all right, let's just take this story and turn it completely orally. And not only is that insulting to the tradition of oral passing things down orally, but it's disrespectful and wrong. You can't just flip-flop a culture to try and be woke. Because that's what I was doing a lot of my research. It was like, yes, we absolutely can flip cultures and learn about each other and learn about each other's differences. And I completely agree that we can learn about each other's differences, but you can't just swap cultures. You know what I mean? You have to learn and love about your differences. So I think the idea of oral tradition and written tradition swapping is incorrect. But I think that they can take inspiration from each other and create these beautiful plays like Tooth and Talon, like Bears, like Arabian Nights, like all of these stories that are technically oral tradition, but were written down for everyone to be able to enjoy and learn. So I think the continued tradition of writing down Indigenous stories is a beautiful idea, but of course it should be done by Indigenous writers, by Indigenous elders, by people who know Indigenous history inside and out, not professors of Indigenous history, Indigenous peoples. Because you can have a PhD in a subject and still not have the right to be able to teach that subject. At least I believe. I would never take a study on Egyptian courses and consider myself, and even if I got my PhD in Egyptian studies, I would never consider myself a, master or PhD in Egyptian studies because I'm not Egyptian and that's not my place. I may have studied Egyptian history, Egyptian culture, and Egyptian spirituality, Egyptian food, and stuff like that. But that's different. That's taking inspiration and learning about separate sects of the culture, not saying, hey, we're going to take your tradition as a whole and just adapt it into our thing. That's thieving, that's theft, that's disrespectful. And knowing now, after doing my research for this week, that's what so many stories are, like Aladdin, like Pocahontas, like Moana, is incredibly sad to me and eye-opening to the fact of, hey, these are what these stories are. These are just oral tradition stories that are centuries old that were tried to be adapted to a Western format and sold to Western viewers. That's just theft. So to sum up today, I believe that with the knowledge I have now, you cannot just take something and try and turn it into a different audience and turn it to a different culture. You can learn from each other, love from each other, love each other's differences, but there is points of limitation. And that's okay. Like you said yourself, Desiree, we don't need to know everything. I think I'm starting to understand that, and I think I didn't agree at first, but looking into my books, my stories, looking into this research, so much harm has been done from people who did try to learn everything about the culture, everything about everything. Maybe it is okay to just love and understand one another, not necessarily know everything about each other. And that's a brand new concept for my European brain to wrap around. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the video. Much love to you, Desiree, and you, Gertrude. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and have a good day. Bye, guys.